All right, welcome in to our very first guest on this segment of the show that we like to call the panel. And so our first guest is going to be someone who is a creative person from my former hometown, KV's current hometown of Tulsa, Oklahoma. We're really proud of this dude. When we talked about our origin stories earlier, it's funny. This guest is someone who has intersected with both of us in different points of our life. We didn't even know we both knew this guy. And so it's kind of funny how that all works out. But ladies and gentlemen, the very first guest on UnCaged panel is Hank Byrd. How you doing today, Hank?
I'm good, man. How you guys?
Oh, man, I'm great.
Hang it in there, bro.
Yeah, man.
So
I'm good.
Here's the question that I'm going to want to ask I'm going to be asking every single person that we have on when we have them, is to talk about their origin stories with comic books. Where did you begin? How did you get going when it comes to getting into comic books?
So there was part of my journey through just literacy, man. My mom was really big on reading. And so she supported me reading comic books very early. So to my origin story started with my father reading the newspaper. And I would sit, close to him and wait patiently for him to drop the Sunday funny papers down. Because, that was part of the Sunday paper. It was, you had a real thick comic section. And so I would get that from him every Sunday and read the funny papers. And so that started really early age. And then as I got older, I got into reading comic books. And like a lot of parents, my mom didn't have any problem with it because the way she felt about it was he's reading. And so that started real early for me. And so we, back in the day, there weren't a ton of comic shops around. So you had to order comic books in the mail. And you can get boxes of comic books in the mail for, not a lot of money. So my mom would, allow me to buy comic books that way. Another way was we had the, I don't know how old you guys are, but we used to have the bookmobile in the classroom. Right. And my mom would let me order from the bookmobile, and I'd be the kid with a stack of books from the bookmobile. So I would get Spider-Man and all the superhero stuff, that would come on the bookmobile. So, so comic books for me were just, part of just literacy growing up. My mom, she always encouraged it. So she figured, if he gonna read, let him read something that he likes. And then that meandered into me reading science fiction and choose your own adventure books and and everything else that I read as a kid that inspired me. So I started reading Marvel comics really early, X-Men, got into that real early, and then I was reading Black Panther when I was 8. Okay. So I got into that before it got even popular. So I was reading it way back when. Ooh. So I got into that pretty early. My parents, always wanted us to read stuff definitely with Black people in it. So I read a lot of, books that had Black folks in it and stuff like that. So I always made it a point to do that as well. So it started really early for me.
What was your impressions of some of those first comic books that you were reading? Some of those first Marvel, like Black Panthers. How did it read to you as an 8-year-old?
Well, I didn't really have a concept then of what, as far as the Afrocentric sentiment in the book, especially when Christopher Priest was writing it, because that's when Black Panthers first started getting its Afrocentric feel, is when he started writing the comic. Before, it really didn't have that when Jack Kirby and Stan Lee were doing it. He was a Black character who lived in Africa, but that's pretty much as far as that went. It didn't really tackle any issues of race. until Priest wrote it, and then eventually Reginald Hudlin and Ta-Nehisi Coates. But back then, I didn't really have a sense of that as an 8-year-old, and what I was looking at. I got that from my parents. Most of my racial identity and things that I thought about as far as race, that came from my parents.
Well, kind of along those lines. So Black Panther, what about Luke Cage? Did you ever get into a little bit of Luke Cage when you was younger? And what?
I got into Heroes for Hire. I got into Heroes for Hire when I was a kid. Got into later on Jon Stewart, Misty Knight. I got into pretty much all of them. I read everything. Everything Marvel and DC was putting out. Mr. Terrific. All types of books. But again, a lot of those books didn't tackle issues that deep in my day.
Yeah.
A lot of that came later.
What was the first book? What was the first book you brought with your own money? Like you went out and you was like, all right, this is me, mama, nobody else. No, it was not a hand-me-down. Your money you paid for. Do you remember?
Yes, it was Indiana Jones had a series of comic books out. And I bought those with my own money. That was like one of the first series of books that I bought with my bread. It was using my parents giving me the money for it before that. But yeah, when I started, that was my first one. I think I was like 12, 13. And then, and after that, I started working. I started being an employee somewhere, from there. I've been working since I was 14. So, yeah. And I started buying my own books then.
Well, what was the first arc that you remember that fascinated you when the whole Heroes for Hire books? Do you remember the first arc that was like, yo, I kind of like this?
Man, I done forgot more things than that. I couldn't even tell you. I couldn't even tell you.
What, along the lines of you got to that, what age did you get to when you were saying like, you know what, maybe I should put these comics down for a little while? Because I hear a lot of people say that they get to an age where they set it down. So you're saying you never got to that age? So
never happened.
Yeah, a lot of people, what they do is they say, I'm in college now and I don't buy as much, or I just don't follow it. So there was never a gap in comics where you just said, I'm out.
That happened with me with video games. They got to an age where I said, I put the video games down for a little bit. Then I turned around and bought an Xbox last year, but I got to an age where it's like, yeah, video games, I probably put that down for a little bit, but I never put comics down. I've always bought comics. I don't buy as much as I used to. I used to buy a lot, but I don't buy as much as I used to, but I've never put it down.
So what are you doing with all of them? Like, where are they? Do you still got them? Are they,
No, not the collection I had. When I was, I think, I want to say 28, 29, before I moved back to Oklahoma, I sold a lot. It was a financial situation, so I had to sell. I sold a lot. I had a big collection of comics, and I had a big collection of vinyl records. And so I sold a lot of comics that I had and a lot of vinyl records that I had. I have a financial situation I was in.
What's the one comic book?
So I have a question.
Oh, go ahead, KV.
I have a question. So, Hank, you're pretty prolific as far as your creative product. What role does your history with comic books play in your current creative products?
Definitely the power of the cliffhanger ending. Making sure that every character in your work has meaning. I don't like writing meaningless characters. I definitely want to make sure everything that I write, every character has an arc of their own. And that I always interject some comic book Easter eggs and some of the things that I write. You know, when people watch bLERDs, the first thing you see is that I have the Earth 99.9. And so a lot of people don't know what that means, but a lot of comic book heads do. And so they understand that the Tulsa, Oklahoma that we're watching isn't your Tulsa, Oklahoma, even though it is. It isn't. It exists in its own universe. So I always inject a little bit of things that I remember in comic books into my work.
So tell us a little bit about your work. You know, we have you here as a comic book fan, but you are a filmmaker. You are a dynamic creator in the community. So tell us a little bit about how you describe who you are and the work that you do.
Yeah, so creatively, I mean, I'm just a product of a lot of things. I'm a product of, you know, growing up, military kid, travel all over the world. So I definitely call myself a global citizen. So I got a little unique perspective as far as the way I look at the world. I'm a comic book reader. I'm a sci-fi head. I'm a hip hop head. So all that goes into in my writing. I'm a black man. I'm a father. I'm a veteran myself. So every bit of that goes into how I write and the things that I like to create. And so my goal as a creator is to think outside of the box with everything that I do. And you know, I hope I was able to do that with currently am able to do that with Blerd, which is, you know, just a kind of a different story that people are used to seeing. So when I sat down to write the show, you know, I probably told you before, I didn't want to create caricatures, because that's what we usually see in pop culture. When you say black nerd, what you usually see is a caricature. You know, you see somebody with glasses and pocket protectors and they talk funny and all this, and that's not who we are. And that's not who black nerds are. That's the furthest from the truth. Not to say those archetypes don't exist, but that's not who we are. And so, yeah.
Well, who are? So I've heard this argument on two sides about the nerd versus Blerd. Kind of like I've heard black nerd or bLERDs, so to speak, say, no, I'm just a regular everyday nerd. Don't put Blerd on it. Black has nothing to do with it. So tell me, what is the difference between a Blerd and just a nerd?
I mean, somebody that says that isn't really being very, and I could probably get in trouble for saying this, but somebody that says that is not being very genuine. We are black people. Right. So let's start there. So you can't separate what you are from what you watch and what you see. You cannot not be affected by that.
Yeah.
You know, I remember Nichelle Nichols, who played Uhura, talking about that, and I'm sure you guys remember the conversation she had with Martin Luther King.
Right. Yep.
And they were big fans of the show because she was on it.
Yeah.
So you can't separate your blackness from your nerdness. You can't separate that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what are
that's a deeper issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, way deeper issue. I've had that conversation with many black nerds, you know, who would say that to me. Oh, I'm just a regular old nerd. No, you're not. You're still a black man.
What's the unique experience of a black nerd growing up in your era? Because I can recognize that it may be different for them now, but your era growing up, we're talking, you know, like that late 80s or 90s. What was it like being a Blerd or black nerd then?
Oh, we'll go back to the 70s, man. I'm a 70s kid.
Oh.
So
me too.
So yeah, I was born in the 70s. So the problem that we had back then was representation.
All right.
Okay. So when you talk about representation all the way around, you know, there weren't a lot of us in science fiction. There weren't a lot of us in comic books. You know, you didn't have very many black comic book heroes when I was coming up. So you had to seek out those those little nuggets of representation where you could find them. Like I said, you had Uhura on Star Trek, but that was before my time. That was the 60s. As we got into the 70s, you would see Black people in sidekick roles on shows. You had like on KV. I know you probably remember like V and other shows that would come out back in the day in the 70s and 80s.
Right.
And they had a couple of sprinkled in the show, but we weren't the star.
You talking here?
Yeah, we weren't ever the stars in any of those shows. So there was like really no representation as far as Black people in the shows. So that didn't happen till later. You didn't have the Geordie LaForges and, Captain Cisco's and all that stuff. You didn't have any of that back in the day. So we didn't have those types of characters that represented us in prominent roles. And of course, it took almost 60 years to get Black Panther on the screen. So I'm just saying, we didn't have a lot of that. Video games as well. You didn't have video games with a lot of Black people in them. I don't really think you still do. Maybe on Madden.
Yeah. And in the video game.
But as far as video games headlining with a Black person on the cover, yeah, that ain't, Kratos is voiced by a Black man.
Yeah. The video game cartridge was invented by a Black man. And, is no representation there. So
no representation.
What about the factor of what a blerd goes through within his own community? What was that experience for you?
Yeah, it was very ostracized in my day. Now it's a term that you can embrace, and you can embrace the term now, but we were blerds when there wasn't a name for it. You know what I'm saying? So we would call, my last name is Byrd, so I used to be Byrd, you nerd. I used to be Byrd the nerd and all that stuff back in school. And but that was fine. I didn't mind it. I didn't really hide who I was until I got older. When you got older and then girls got involved, then you kind of slid the comic books under the bed and kind of you wanted to fit in. You wanted to fit in. You know what I mean? And everything. So it comes a time where you had to do that. Then you get married. You start having family, and you kind of you still read your comic books, but you kind of gotta assimilate a little bit. And which I cover in the show bLERDs. The thing that, and I think I told you this, Dru, that every character in the show, Charlie, Warren, and Ty, is me at a different point in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's deep. That's real dope, man. Tell us more about bLERDs, man, because there might be someone that's watching this and they just hadn't got a chance to get a hold of it. Give us the rundown on what you're talking about here with this show bLERDs.
Yeah. So the catalyst of the show was it was me and my cousin, my late cousin Jerome. He was murdered in 94, and he was a really great artist, like really, really good. And that's what we used to do as kids. We used to sit around and dream about making our own comic books, and I would write it and he would draw it. And so and we were both nerds. Even though we lived in the hood and, it was gang culture and all that stuff going on when we were kids, and we were a part of it, but we still read comics and all that. But anyway, the story centers around three childhood friends, Charlie, Warren, and Ty. Two of them work in a cushy advertising job, and they suddenly find themselves downsized. So Charlie, who's the free spirit of the group, the guy that still reads comic books, the guy that still collects things, the guy that still, he's just a nerd. He decided he wants to start a comic book company, or start a comic book of a character they drew in high school called Subatomic Sam. And so he wants to enlist his friends, Warren and Ty, to help him do this. And these guys are in their early 30s. And, one of them is married, and one of them has his own business and everything. So they decided to put their resources together and start this comic book company. And it just talks about their misadventures of doing that, and along with the women that are in their lives as well, who also have story arcs of their own.
All right. So what made you choose Tulsa, Oklahoma to, a lot of people, they don't use where they're living. Like what was unique about Tulsa being a character in the show?
Yeah, that's just the thing. I mean, nobody makes shows here. Why not? Tulsa has a lot of rich history. It has very talented people. I mean, I felt I'd be remiss if I didn't make it here.
Yeah. So what I want to ask you a question about your creative process, and KB kind of already hit on this for me. I want to know when you go in and you say, okay, Earth 99 point, like the depth of creating something like that, how far and reaching is this concept? Like, is it much more than what we see? I mean, like, yeah. And like, is this something that, let's just say no show, is this something that we can expect books from years down the line? How deep is this?
Well, we start every show off with a black goddess.
Yeah.
Let's start there. So we start off every show with a black goddess. We don't really know her story yet.
Yeah,
but we will. We will learn how she got on top of Tisdale Hill.
Yeah.
To be a black goddess. We'll learn about that. There's a character that I play in the show called the Brim. We don't know where he comes from or when he comes from, but we'll learn about him as well. So there'll be some things in the show that will require you to, what do you call it? Challenge your beliefs.
Okay, good.
So you created a universe, basically. You're creating a universe.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Basically, yeah. I mean, yeah. It's basically a universe. And see, that's the thing about the show, because people are like, well, are they going to be like playing video games and reading comic books? No. That's not where the Blerd in it comes from. So no, they're not going to be. It's not Big Bang Theory. They're not going to be sitting around playing video games and wearing flash shirts and doing certain things. They're not caricatures, but they do exist in a world that is unlike our own, and we're gonna see aspects of that pour into the story as we go along. I mean, you have characters that break the fourth wall. You have people looking at the camera and breaking the fourth wall, and in episodes we have some strange things going on that you're like, okay, this is Tulsa, but this is a little different. There's something a little strange about this Tulsa.
So I'm fascinated with the other, like you also write other, other things outside of bLERDs. You got other projects and other things going. Do you ever see yourself getting to the point where, do you have a crossover in mind that from a book or a movie or something else that you're going to do one day that's going to blend in with bLERDs?
I actually do.
All right. I'm excited about it because at this point, it's just knowing that you've got this going and it's some representation, not just for us as brothers, but it's representation for in respect and for women of color, like for Black women that's out there. That's exciting. And to know that you're actually working on something that's deep and not just surface level. So I got a Hollywood kind of question for you. Not that I'm calling you Hollywood, but do you find yourself in a position where, you feel like your work and your craft, do you ever feel like you're going to have to do some compromising, or are you going to try to keep it as pure as possible?
Well, anytime that you're creating something not with your money, it's going to always be some compromise and some give when you're doing that. That's why I chose to make bLERDs independently. Okay. And because the story that I'm trying to tell and the things that I'm trying to do, I probably wouldn't get to do that with the people that I'm doing it with, and in the city that I'm trying to do it in. Yeah. At one time I was gonna shop bLERDs as a series, and I decided, it was more important to me to make it myself. And I knew in doing that I would have to raise the funds and do most of it on my own because, I'm asking to shoot a show in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which most producers and distributors will probably be, nah, we ain't doing that. We're gonna move this series to a bigger city. We're gonna hire actors that are more known. We're gonna create our own writers' room, and we're gonna tell the story that we want to tell.
Yeah.
And I couldn't have that. So.
And I can imagine, like, after The Watchmen comes out and they don't shoot it in Tulsa, but, but it has Tulsa's name on it. And then I'm pretty sure we're going to see a series of different things coming out this year, being the 100-year mark of the massacre, that people aren't probably never even going to step foot in Tulsa, but just use footage. And so it's important to film in Tulsa, get it authentic and capture it where it is. When you were in front of the first scenes in front of like the sushi place, I'm like, oh man, I used to go there. I used to be right there by the gym. It was just exciting to see and have that little bit of representation. You got any questions for him, KB?
Oh man, I've known Hank. We go back to me and Hank met through hip hop actually.
Right.
Yeah. Strings enough. And so I watched Hank do his thing. And I don't really have a question, man. I just want to say just how proud I am of this brother. He keeps grinding, and he plays by his own rules. And you know what? You got to do that, man. You got to do that. And I love his work.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that, man. I really appreciate that.
I still have your name in my phone as Big Hank. Because that's when you gave me your number, that's what it was from. You was
yeah.
That's Big Bank Hank. You got it wrong, bro.
Well, what's funny is like around. It was Sunday. He came and did my show when I used to do a show in Tulsa on Sundays, and we did an interview about Christian hip hop. And he had an artist that he was working with, and this was, here's the crazy thing: time flies by so fast. This was 2007, maybe 2006, something like that.
Yeah, 7. It was 7.
Yeah, and it's just like to think it's already 2001, and you still grinding, you still doing. It's a little bit different hustle, but it's the same. It's the same hustle. Speaking of which, you couldn't see it from this angle right here, so I had to pull it up. Tell people how they can get a hold of all of the different things that you got, because that's important. It's one thing to just apply, like we need to support. We need to purchase some merch, and we need to download the show or, watch the show, put it on repeat, even if you didn't seen it, just go ahead and get the streams up on it. So tell us how we can get a hold of your work and support you.
Yeah, so the show is currently on, the pilot episode is currently streaming on Tubi, which is a free app. TUBI. You can go on Tubi.com, or you can download the app. It should be on all streaming things. If you got Roku or Fire Stick or you have a smart TV or whatever, you should be able to get Tubi. It's free, and so you can get the first episode there. We're working on getting the second episode up. It's been a lot of changes over at Tubi. So it's been very slow for content to get uploaded over there. So we apologize to folks that are still waiting on episodes to upload. So we've been having an issue with that, but hopefully it'll be resolved within the next week or so. From there, you can go to blerdswebseries.com. That way you can read about the show, see what the show is about. You can go on to Blerd's gear, and you can get you some merch. You can get some t-shirts, and we have face masks, mugs, phone covers. We have everything for you. The sweatshirts, everything. So you go and get some merch from us. Again, read about the show, get on our mailing list. And if you have any general questions or anything, you can definitely get in contact with us that way as well. You can reach me on all social media, Hank Byrd, Facebook, Twitter, everything.
All right. Well, man, we appreciate you for being the first guest that we have on the panel. When I wrote up the idea for this show, you were the number one person. I said, we got to get Hank first. You know, and there's other
I
people
appreciate that,
we
man.
could have gotten. I was like, nah, Hank first, 100%. We got to go with my man because you've been here, you know, been a part of our lives, and you know the comic book game for real. So we're gonna have you back on, and we're gonna just talk straight comics. Like we're gonna get into breaking down some issues and some story arcs, and we're gonna have to get you involved with that process, man. So you gonna be back for us, man?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
KV, you got any more for him?
Big back.
That's
That's all I got to say.
all right.